I got it.
Okay, great. All right, I will go ahead and call the August 11th, 2022 meeting of the STP Project Selection Committee to order. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of July 22nd, 2022, the determination has been made that it is neither practical nor prudent to hold an in-person meeting for this committee. To ensure that we're as transparent and open as possible, we posted meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we'll take all votes by roll call. So let's begin with that roll call of members in attendance. Doug, could you take care of that?
Sure. If anyone is sitting in for a regular member, please state your name when I call the member's name. Kama Dobbs.
I'm here.
Dan Burke.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin O'Malley.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Schreiber.
This is Grant. If Jeff's not here, I can sit in for him until he joins.
Great. Thanks, Grant.
Yeah.
Mayor Shelkey.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Rockingham.
Here.
President Gallagher.
Here.
Thank you. And then our advisory members, John Donovan.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Green.
This is Killen, Cook County.
Thank you, sis. Heather Mullins.
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you. And then Chad Riddle. I don't see Chad, so that's the roll.
All right, thank you, Doug. It looks like we have the necessary quorum to begin. So let's go to our agenda changes and announcements. We do have one agenda change. We're going to move item 5.3 regarding safety project scoring ahead of item 5.1 today, just to facilitate some staff scheduling. Does any member of the committee want to propose any other additional changes or make any announcements? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to our approval of minutes. We have before us the draft minutes of June 23rd, 2022. Are there any corrections or additions? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
Mayor Shelkey so moves.
Mayor Rockingham, second.
Thank you, Mayor and Mayor. Any discussion? If not, Doug, will you call the roll of the voting members, please?
Will do. Dan Burke.
Aye.
Kama Dobbs.
Aye.
President Gallagher.
Aye.
Kevin O'Malley, Kevin O'Malley, sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Rockingham.
Aye.
Mayor Shelkey.
Aye.
And Grant Davis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Fantastic. The motion carries. Next on our agenda are the active program management reports. These status reports in item 4.1 reflect updates from the June quarterly update cycle. Really the only change since the posting of the status reports is that I did want to call out that the agreements for the phase 1 engineering for the University Park Metro Station are expected to be locally executed next week. Are there any questions about the status of any other projects on the reports? All right, item 4.2 includes updated regional accounting through July 21st. Nothing to really point out on that today, but happy to take any questions on that regional accounting. All right, seeing and none.
Kama, sorry,
Yeah,
I think Jeff just joined, so I'll hand it off to him.
Great, we'll let that.
Apologies, running behind.
Thanks for that. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the meaty part of our agenda for today, which is 4 methodology topics to discuss. And I'm going to start with, as mentioned earlier, item 5.3, which is some modifications to the need scoring for our safety projects. So Todd Schmidt's here today to give us an overview of staff's proposed modifications to the methodology. Todd, all set?
All right, yes, can you hear me? Great, thank you. As we know, the shared fund methodology is designed to provide scaled scores to compare one project application to another, rather than to provide an exact numeric score. This not only helps us to avoid ties, but also recognizes that all other things being equal, we want to elevate projects that accomplish certain things. During the first two programming cycles, the need component of transportation impact scoring for corridor and small areas safety projects was an exception to this. So for the current methodology, with absolute number hold point values assigned based on the project's SRI or safety road index as shown here, these absolute scores can give an advantage or disadvantage to safety projects compared to other project types. The SRI is calculated by IDOT for both the state and local system and used in IDOT's programming activities. For example, looking at the range of scores for safety projects versus roadway construction projects during the last cycle, we see that there is a significant gradation for the reconstruction projects, but very little for safety projects. However, you will notice that all the safety projects were located on a critical location or a high location. So we are seeing projects proposed at those high need or high SRI locations. Next slide. Additionally, our safety resource group has identified two issues that the region should focus safety efforts on: speed-related crashes and crashes involving bicyclists, pedestrians, and other vulnerable road users, or VRUs. IDOT's not yet released a Strategic Highway Safety Plan, or SHSP, includes 3 program areas: roadway departures, pedestrians, and speeding. So this also is in line with IDOT's programming efforts. These are also in line with FHWA's Safe Systems approach through making roads safer for all roadway users and safe speeds. Next slide. With these things in mind, increasing gradation and scoring and giving more weight to the highest risk crash types, staff proposes splitting the safety needs scoring into 2 components by first rescaling the SRI score values and then by adding a second component that considers the percent of crashes in the project area that are speed related and the percentage that involve VRUs or vulnerable road users. Each of the high risk components would multiply the percentage of crashes by 2 points. So if, for example, the project had a high SRI and 100% of the crashes were speed related and 50% involved VRUs, the total score would be 12 plus 2 plus 1 or 15 points. Crashes that involve both high-speed drivers and vulnerable road users would be counted in both percentage calculations. If the scope of the project does not include countermeasures for these crash types, the points for these crash types would not be given. Remember that this methodology is only proposed for the projects that are seeking funding specifically to improve safety. The safety scoring elements that are part of the needs score for other project categories like road reconstructions or expansions is not proposed for change at this time. And with that, that's all I had to present. Be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Todd. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Kevin, I see you're waving your hand.
Yeah, I agree in the sentiment of emphasizing speed, since we know that's the core, reason that a lot of crashes turn into injury or fatality kind of crashes. However, my concern is more just data, and that one of our experiences here at the city is just whether a crash, how they're categorized in the data as a speed related is sometimes not so clear, and sometimes not actually how it's codified. So somebody may be traveling, it may be an angle crash that is logged as an angle crash or something like that, and yet we know that speeding is what could have caused one of the bad behaviors, or at least is what made it more severe and therefore injury producing. So I'm not critiquing the idea. I think it's the right idea. I just really want to flag for you to jump in and make sure that the data is going to be helpful in doing this properly, because most of the reporting is going to then also be done at the local level, a lot of it. And so how each police department or whoever codes things may be very different from community to community. for whatever reasons. So I know so I just wanted to flag that. That's our experience in Chicago of relying on that data metric.
Yeah, and we see that also in the crash data. It's always based off the officer's opinions and how that happened, or sometimes it might not be fully realized. So we are aware of there are some issues with the data. So we are cognizant of that issue for sure. But when we do big crashes in different categories, we do the same definitions as IDOT uses. So we're at least using the same methodology that IDOT uses to calculate if that crash is a speed-related crash or a pedestrian-related crash. But for sure, there is issues with the data.
And I guess to piggyback on that, Todd or Kevin, do you think that the potential for data issues outweighs the good that this factor does remembering that we're scoring projects relative to each other. And so I would hope that, those nuances in the data kind of are minimized because of that relative scoring. But, I'd be interested in what you two think about that.
Yeah, coming back to it's about local reporting. And so maybe you guys, one of the things you could do is sort of go through it all and see if there is just seems to be more of a trend by jurisdiction, speed related tends to be reported more in town A than it does in town B, just to double check, do a filter on that, right?
Yeah, and I think, Todd, unless you disagree, the last cycle, I think we had eight applications for safety projects. And so I think we should be able to dig into the reporting a little bit, more thoroughly than we would if we had 80 applications. So. Yeah,
I think we'll be able to dig into the actual crash reports. Usually we just use the shapefile that IDOT provides, but if we have, eight projects, we could dig into those crash reports and read the descriptions and what the officer wrote down and take a look at that a little bit more thoroughly.
Other comments, questions, or suggestions from the committee?
If I may, Kama, just a quick comment. I just want to commend CMAP for including the high-risk crash types. It's pretty alarming and quite honestly unsettling when we see the rise in pedestrian and bicyclist crashes. So really happy to see some dedicated scoring going to improving those conditions across the region.
Appreciate that, Sis. And I think that, don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the work that the Safety Resource Group is doing, I think this is an incremental step in our scoring, and we'll probably see further refinements for our next cycle in 2 years when we have, better focus and better data in the region. So. I don't see anything else from the committee. Is there anyone in the audience today that wanted to speak on this issue? I know this committee tends to not hold public comment till the end. We want to hear what everybody has to say as we address these individual topics. So I want to give that chance today.
This is Mike Clemens from Lake County DOT. Kind of building off what Kevin had suggested. I guess my thought on this would be to maybe take it a step further when evaluating crashes and perhaps even reducing the SRI component a little bit further, keeping what you have for the high risk crash types, but maybe adding some additional points if those crashes result in fatalities or serious injuries. And maybe that helps mitigate some of the coding, whether it's an angle crash or something else, but all things being equal, a speed crash that results in property damage versus injuries and fatalities. I think we could pretty easily pull that data out.
I see.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Todd, from a staff scoring perspective, I don't think that would be an issue to maybe drop the SRI component back, maybe scale it to a maximum of 14 instead of 16 and have have the same percentage of of these high-risk crash types, but also the percentage that's K&As only? Or were you suggesting replace all pedestrian-related crashes with only the fatal and serious pedestrian crashes?
My suggestion was what you just said, Kama. Just kind of build on what you have and provide some additional points if there are fatalities and K's and A's. Yeah, I just I don't think we should ignore the crashes that don't have those, but the ones that do should probably get some more points.
I see a couple heads nodding on committee members. Does that give anybody any kind of heartburn? If not, staff can work up a modification to this scoring and bring that back at our next meeting. All right, I see nods. So any other comments or questions on this topic? Going once, twice. All right, well, thank you, Todd, for that presentation, and thank you, everybody, for the comments. We will we'll bring back a slight alternative at our next meeting. So let's go on to our next methodology topic, which gets back to eligible project types, which we've talked about at our last two meetings, kind of looking at ways to consider rail yards or rail terminals in our project type. So John Hadsma is here today to kind of talk about the continued research that staff has done.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is John Hadsma. I'm on the TIP team here at CMAP. As you all are aware, staff's been looking at ways commuter rail yards could be added to that STP scoring methodology. And since that June 23rd committee meeting, staff has had further conversations and communications with Metra and CTA, which has really guided us in developing what we are proposing here today. So what we heard from you all is that, creating a new project category specifically for rail yard projects was not necessarily desirable. So today we're proposing to include rail yards as a part of the transit station improvement project type category. So to be inclusive of nuances in how transit agencies operate, we're also furthering that scope to include terminals as well as yards. The scoring methodology we are suggesting for yards and those terminals projects is really tailored towards the condition of components like the existing transit station improvement, but also includes small elements that are specific to yards and terminal projects needs and improvement scoring sections. So as you are able to see right here in the slide, for need, 80% of the score would come from the cost weighted average term score of that component. So just like current station projects. Components for yards or terminals could be things like switches, signals, platforms, crew facilities. And then the other 20% or those 4 points is determined from the level of compliance with code requirements such as ADA of that yard or terminal. So if we advance here to the next slide, for the improvement section of the scoring, 75% of that score would come from the change to the condition, and that's calculated as a difference in the cost weighted term score of the components before and after the project, and that'd be scaled to 15 points, which again, that mirrors the current methodology for station improvement projects. And then the other 5 points would be split between two metrics for 2.5 points each. The first would be, the percent increase in the vehicle storage capacity before and after the project of that yard or terminal. And then the second metric for the other 2.5 points would be the reduction in non-revenue trips, otherwise known as, deadhead. So as mentioned, we're really looking for just discussion today, see if this is something the committee is interested in continuing on towards, more of an implementing it into the methodology, or if there's any changes you would like to see in this proposed methodology. And then based off that feedback, staff can either, continue on finalizing this initiative, or if it's not something you're still interested, the committee is interested in, we can stop altogether. So just really we'll open up for discussion, and if there's any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Questions or comments from the committee? I think that just wanted to add kind of to kick off discussion, thanking John for reaching out to CCA and Metra, and thanking both of them for kind of sitting down and trying to find a way to balance, the committee's concerns about diluting the overall program by adding project types, while also kind of addressing these, limited number of potential yard or terminal projects in the region that could have a regional impact. So just wanted to say thanks to both John and CTA and Metra for that. And I see Sis is unmuted and ready to give us a comment or thought, so I'll stop babbling.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kim. I think this is a worthwhile endeavor, and I very much understand. We want to make sure that we're preserving the intent of the program, but I think as we're looking at the broader opportunities that are also coming out with federal funding, if we find that certain project types might not be as competitive or raise up or create internal regional competition, I think we need to do our part to ensure that there are funding programs available to support projects like this when there doesn't seem to be another, dedicated funding source for it. So I think the approach that is being taken, is good. I think we should kind of continue down the path, but absolutely, understanding the impacts on the program as a whole. I think it's better at this point to be inclusive versus exclusive, as we're navigating all of these various, funding opportunities that are available at the federal level and those that come through CMAP for discretionary funding.
Thanks, Sis. Other questions or comments?
This is Heather, and I just really want to echo what Sis was saying, is that, I think I had some of those same concerns about diluting the program by adding a new category. I think the proposal you've come up with is creative, incorporating into an existing category, and so I like that, and I applaud you for that. But I also think, similar to the funding sources, there just aren't a ton of funding sources out there to fund these types of projects. And if we have the ability to be creative with the funding sources that we have more control over, what can be eligible, I think we need to do that, and I think this is a good opportunity for that. This fund is fairly new. I still think we're kind of at the beginning of formulating what this program ultimately looks like moving forward. So I think this is a good time to pursue this.
Thanks, Heather. President Gallagher?
Yeah, I agree. I would just like to support the previous two comments. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that this would just be a nice improvement for the entire region just by improving our yards. And of course, we wouldn't be doing it alone. We'd be doing it in conjunction with other funding sources, most likely. So just wanted to add my support to the previous two comments. And thank you, CMAP, for looking into this and finding a creative way to incorporate it. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that. Other thoughts or comments from the committee? Anyone in the audience want to add any thoughts to this discussion today? All right, well, it sounds like, from those that offered an opinion here, that we've landed at a decent compromise here, where we have a way to entertain these project types that I think are important to the region, and certainly we know there's a limited number of them out there, and that's probably why there are limited fund sources for these types of projects. So I would say let's go ahead and let staff continue to tweak this a little bit, and we'll need to come back and talk about what planning factors go along with this project type, how we'll score the jobs plus households for this project type. We didn't want to dig into that research if the committee wasn't satisfied with this inclusion in the transit station project type. So we'll dig into that, include that in a future meeting, and thank you everyone again for the work on this, and happy that we're going to give this a try. We go through this methodology review between every cycle, so if this doesn't work for the region, we have an opportunity to take a different course in our next cycle. So thank you, everyone. Moving on to our next methodology item is our jobs plus households impacts, and I'm going to go ahead and take this one today. I'm looking to see who I have supporting me here from staff. Looks like I'm on my own, so I will go ahead and present this proposal today, and I'll go from there. So as we know, the jobs and household score is a component of our transportation impact score. This is worth 10 points out of the total of 100 points in our methodology, so 10% of the total score, and is used for all project types. This criterion is included in the methodology really with the intent of elevating projects that are more regional in nature, those that serve a larger number of households or provide access to a larger number of jobs. Inherently, this methodology does lead to higher scores in this category for transit projects, which tend to have a larger regional reach, as well as for projects that are located in more densely populated areas. However, we have heard concerns that there have been projects scored in past cycles that do score very high in both the need and improvement components of our scoring, but haven't quite risen to the level of being funded due particularly to low jobs and household scores. While staff does continue to believe that the reach of a project is a critical component in determining the transportation impact, there is some room to improve upon this methodology for sure. So as detailed in the memo in your packet, staff did review our past scoring and also considered kind of the development patterns of the region, and as a result, we are proposing a modification just to the households portion of the jobs and households criteria. So to calculate jobs and households for a project currently, staff performs what's called a select link analysis to determine the model analysis zones that users of the project travel to and from. These zones make up what we call the project's travel shed. So that's the purple zones in the slide on the screen. The sum of the jobs and the households within each project's travel shed are then scaled against the sums from all of the other projects' applications each cycle to assign the jobs and households points. When we were considering refinements to this criterion, staff considered that while some projects may not seem significant within the whole 7-county region, they can be significant within a subregion, serving a very large number of households, say compared to the total households within the political boundaries. So we looked at counties to start with. However, political boundaries are somewhat meaningless to how we travel and get around our region. And so staff is proposing defining what we're going to call a project area and comparing the households within the travel shed, the purple boxes, to the total households within the project area. So the proposed definition of that project area is done essentially by drawing a circle around the project where the radius of the circle is the distance to the farthest zone that was identified as part of the travel shed. Then we would pick up all of the zones within that radius to determine what the percentage is of households in the travel shed versus the project area. And that would lead us to being able to score on a percentage proportion of households instead of that raw number of households. And the numbers here on this slide are just for example. If there were 90,000 households in the travel shed and just under 200 households in that total project area, then the proportion would be 45%. And so that would be scaled for scoring. So again, using the total jobs scaled to 5 points and then adding the proportion of households served scaled to 5 points would get us back to that total of 10 points in our overall methodology. And staff does believe that this modification will result in a more equitable process that will elevate those projects within less dense areas that are more sub-regionally significant, while still honoring our intention to favor projects that encourage transit use and serve in a more regional capacity while discouraging sprawl in our collar counties. So are there questions or comments from the committee on this proposal?
Yeah, Jeff Shelkey'd like to make one. I'm looking, you show me the map. I'm looking at Kankakee. I'm looking at Ottawa. I mean, we're talking about areas that I was not aware of that we had any involvement or control over.
And you're correct, Mayor. We don't, have any control over the households in those areas. We do model out to the Kankakee area and Ottawa area. Part of travel demand modeling is to look at what's coming into and going out of the region. This project is probably an extreme example to put up as a graphic. It was chosen because it's oriented in the right direction for putting on a slide. More projects that are less around the fringes of the region would likely not extend outside of the region. But where, we would not pick up households in, the bottom section of the circle where we don't do any modeling. So, we would only pick up those households that are in our model zones.
I would just make the observation, because I'm the chairman of the Council of Mayors for CMAP, I do get, people contact me with various questions. One of them that I've had some contact with is the Winnebago and Boone County people out northwest of us in the Rockford area. They're very, I get the impression, they're very interested in somehow attaching themselves to the quote unquote Chicagoland area. So I think we could enlarge ourselves pretty significantly if we start going in this way. And I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but it certainly is. There's a lot of people that would like to be, they see what we're doing in Chicago and they see the great advantage that CMAP is bringing for governmental ideas and support. And, what you're doing in there is pretty attractive to a lot of other people who are just on the fringe of us.
For sure. And, as census data comes out and we get new urbanized area boundaries, I think 10 years ago we had this discussion where we did creep into DeKalb County a little bit with our urbanized area. So that discussion's coming again here soon, probably in the spring. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not here in a couple of weeks, but I mean, there's a lot of interest. I mean, CMAP seems to be doing a lot of good stuff, and I take my hat off to them. Proud to be a member of the group, but I mean, there's a lot of other people who'd like to become a member of our association and reap some of the benefits that they're perceiving we have. So I guess we're on the right track here. We're not having to try to encourage people to want to come into us. There are people who want to join us. So I just wonder where this all goes at the end of the day.
Well, I think from this committee's perspective, we will react to changes to the metropolitan planning area as they happen. So, but it's good to hear that folks outside are looking to us for an example of good ways to program.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other comments or questions on this proposal? From committee members or from the audience, Kevin?
Well, again, it's interesting, and I'm I'm always supportive of relooking at data and revising. I just don't. I'm coming back to like what are we trying to fix? And I understand maybe there was some project so I'm just trying to understand that problem first before we decide what the remedy is. And so that's what I'm trying to understand, because I think this issue of like who benefits is always an interesting question in transportation, right?
For sure, for sure. Yeah. So, and I'm not sure that there's even a problem or a perceived problem. We looked back at the data, and you can see that the average points are significantly different across the region, right? For transit projects versus highway projects, and then Cook and Chicago versus the collar counties. So we were asked to take a look to see if there was a way to refine this a little. Staff feels that the jobs are the jobs, but the number of households that a project serves is, there's distinctly more households in the more dense areas than there are in the less dense areas. But thinking about, and the comment was made about a particular project, and what that sponsor said was, we get that this project is, not serving anybody in Chicago, probably not serving anybody in Cook County, but, for our subregion, it serves a tremendous amount of people. And so, we took a look at that proportion. Okay, how many, what is the number? And you can see, for example, there was one project in Kendall County, and that's serving, I gotta uncover it, 331,000 households, but there's only 43,000 households in Kendall County. So clearly that project is reaching far beyond Kendall County. So, staff's proposing, just trying to see if there's a way to kind of pick up that sub-regional proportion. It's not, I wouldn't expect it to make a huge change in the distribution of points. We're talking about decimal places here probably, but it is a way to recognize that sub-regional priority while still knowing that our methodology is focused on, encouraging that transit use and encouraging improvements in denser areas. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And if the committee prefers to stick with raw households, that is absolutely fine. This is a proposal; it's not set in stone. So that's why we're here. To get thoughts. If we don't think it's broken, then we don't have to fix it. We're offering a tweak in response to a comment, and it's really up to the committee to decide if we want to do that tweak or not. So, with that in mind, other comments from the committee or from anyone in the audience today?
Yeah, I applaud CMAP in doing this, and I agree that it's a positive tweak.
Grant, did you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I just have a question. So as I'm understanding it, going to a proportion for households, it could potentially, just extreme argument's sake, if you had 2 houses there and only 2 houses in the travel shed, that would get all 5 points. Or if you had another location that had, say, 100,000 households, and it was serving, in a 1 million household travel shed, it's going to actually get way less points than that project that only was serving 2 houses. That was not clear at all, but does that make sense?
Believe it or not, that made sense to me. So yeah, I mean, the proportions, it is going to elevate with a half of the score where in less dense areas, and probably bring down in the more dense areas the households portion. Whereas, the jobs portion of the scoring is, extremely skewed to the more dense areas. So. And if the committee would like, we can run this analysis on past applications and see how much it changes the scoring.
Interesting to get our heads around, like what are we getting ourselves into, because this can start to have policy implications. If it's are we trying to reward low density, or I don't know.
No, definitely not trying to reward low density. Again, just trying to recognize that there is some, sub-regional significance in a region that's as large as this. So.
But Cameron, that appears to be sort of an unintended consequence of this. So, I mean, we're incentivizing low density.
Yeah, and the comment really was, are we, ask staff to look at, are we giving too much weight to high density? So. We looked at it, we're proposing a suggestion, and if the committee prefers to stay with raw jobs and households, that is certainly fine.
think your proposal to take a look at maybe do, you know, like how this scoring would have affected some existing projects so we can get a more nuanced understanding of just exactly how and where it moves the needle might be helpful to just understand it more before we have to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, today's is just discussion. All of these discussions that we have all summer don't come back for a vote until the fall when we put together the final application book. So yeah, happy to have staff work on providing you know, some real numbers to give it context.
Yeah, that's a great idea, I think. It's a minor tweak in my opinion, but you know, if it has a significant disparity results, then you know, it's probably not what we want. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. The good news is the travel sheds are already defined for the projects that we evaluated last cycle, and that's the heavy lift part. So it shouldn't be too big of a deal to come back with examples. So we will do that. And you know, is there anything else that we should be looking at as a potential alternative to try and address the concern about sub-regional versus full regional priority? Nothing, no other ideas, which is okay. We've batted this around quite a bit internally. So, all right, well, I think staff has some direction to go on this item. So let's move on to our next, which is sub-regional priority points. So I'll present again staff's proposal for modifications to these points. You know, as we know, our region is large and complex, 11 subregions, the city of Chicago. Our methodology is designed to capture the priorities of the entire region. However, we do know that, you know, just like there's sub-regional significance, there's also, you know, different priorities in the different subregions, being the councils in the city. And therefore, we've got 5% of our shared fund scoring reserved for the councils in the city to identify their own priorities. In our first program development cycle 4 years ago, you know, we know that these points were a bonus added on top of the technical score. And then in our last cycle 2 years ago, we shifted to both reduce the weight of these points from a maximum of 20 down to a maximum of 5 and to include those in the total score. Each council in the city are asked to identify 5 of the eligible project applications as their priorities and to rank them from highest to lowest. The points are then assigned from that ranking as shown here. Concerns have been raised about the validity of priorities that may be located far from the sub area that's allocating priority points to them, and about the potential for sub areas to kind of swap points between each other. So to address the validity concerns, staff is proposing limiting the identification of priorities to projects that are wholly within the sub area, giving them points, or to projects whose travel sheds extend into the sub area. So, you know, here's another travel shed map where we can see that the travel shed of this project, which is located in Will County, does actually extend into Cook County, which is the Southwest Council in this case. So this travel shed indicates that the project does serve households and or jobs that are within the Southwest Council as well as within Will County, and therefore could legitimately be a priority for not just Will County, but also for the Southwest Council. You know, while limiting our priorities based on travel sheds, I think makes some sense, and that is what we ended up, the conclusion we ended up coming to last cycle when there were some questions about assigned priority points. There's still some cases, I think, where a project that's external to a council or external to the city could be a priority of that sub area. You know, thinking back, you know, to before all of our reforms to this program in 2017, there used to be a set aside of funding that went to the city of Chicago to program on a regional project. And those, you know, regional projects we all agreed were like improvements to and around the downtown commuter rail stations that, you know, were physically located in the city, but had a huge benefit to the suburbs. So, even though we do our funding distribution differently today, this benefit of projects that are far away from a physical location, still exists. So staff did propose adding language to the application booklet that provides a process for staff to review the justification provided if a council or CDOT identifies a project external to their area as a priority, to discuss that justification with both CDOT and council staff. And then if in those discussions there's disagreement about the validity of something as a priority, it would be brought forward to this committee for a final determination. Finally, just to clean up the administrative side of the scoring, minor additions are proposed to clarify the schedule for assigning priorities, as well as the addition of language to clearly state that point swapping among subregions is not allowed, and could result in those subregions not being able to assign any points. So those minor tweaks have been made. So I think just to summarize for the sake of discussion here, staff proposes the use of the travel shed as a way to determine what's really a valid priority in subregions. We set up a definition and a process for prioritizing projects that are external to a subregion, and then clarified the no point swapping and the timeline. So are there questions or comments, discussion about staff's proposal?
Kama, can you give me an example of the point swapping? What are we trying to prohibit here?
Sure. So, and this was, I think, more of a concern when it was 20 points. I think most of the refinements made in the last cycle fixed that, but there was some discussion and at regional councils, where say the DuPage Council would go to the Lake Council and say, we want you to support this project with some of your points, and in exchange we'll support your project in the next cycle. And so that political point swapping and promise making really doesn't have a place in defining what are the priorities of your subregion. Just wanting to clarify that is not the intent of the priority points. The priority points are there for each subregion to elevate the projects that truly are a benefit and a priority within their subregion.
So use of the travel shed would accomplish that, correct?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to completely prohibit, say the suburbs favoring a city and a project in the city because of the commute relationship that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
But do want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about what truly is a priority within a subregion.
Okay, thank you.
Kama, this is Heather. Was there any evidence that this point swapping was going on previously?
For sure.
Okay, all right. I guess, I'm fine with the changes you're suggesting here. I think it's a little sad that we have to do this. It's almost trying to prevent fraud in the program here, but if this is what we have to do, then I guess we have to do this.
I think, it was definitely discussed in past cycles and discouraged in past cycles, but, adding it into our methodology just firms up the methodology. And it doesn't put staff in the position of having to, make decisions. Other comments or questions, Kevin?
No, I just want to say, yeah, I support refining this to make sure that it's, the meaning of when we started this with allowing points to be shared, that's what we meant to do. And then maybe Heather's right, like it's sad that we had to do, but this is the right direction, yeah.
Mayor Rockingham?
I was going to just say I agree. I think in the past when you said point swapping, we all did it in regards to just trying to get our project moving forward. But this way, it just kind of puts it in writing how we have to move forward on it. So I agree.
Other comments or questions from the committee or anyone in the audience? All right, well, it sounds like we're generally in agreement with the proposal here, so staff will incorporate this into the application booklet. So really, before we move on, just want to, thank John and Todd for their presentations today, and thank the committee for discussion. I think staff has some direction to go here in a couple places, and come back to the committee, and we will work on that going forward. So moving on then to other business, are there any members of the committee that have any other business germane to project selection that they want to discuss today? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat box either, so let's move on to public comment. Staff did not receive any public comment prior to today's meeting, and I don't see anyone wishing to make comment in the chat box. Doug or John, did you see anything?
I have not.
I do not in the chat or anywhere else.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody that's in attendance today have any other comments to make? Please just go ahead and unmute yourself or enter that in the chat.
It's Chad here. I was late, but I'm here. Just want to let people know.
Thanks, Chad. And I also saw Tony Greet from FTA joined us as well. All right. Going once, going twice on public comments. All right. Well, seeing nothing, our next meeting is scheduled just 3 weeks from now on September 1st, so staff's going to be busy at 9:30 a.m. We do expect that to be virtual with CMAP heading towards in-person meetings after Labor Day. So we expect the meetings on the 1st to still be virtual, of course, pending the disaster declaration and requirements of open meetings. At that meeting, we expect to continue, discussions from today. Also revisit the preliminary engineering requirements discussion. We didn't talk about that today because there's not a CMAC committee meeting today, and they're also considering this issue. And then this committee needs to start talking about comments we received in the last cycle about whether there should be minimum thresholds established for projects to be considered for funding. So those are the topics we can expect in a few weeks at our next meeting. Any other comments, questions, business for the good of the committee? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Mayor Shelkey so moves.
And a second.
Mayor Rockingham.
All right. We can do a voice vote for adjournment. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Really, any opposed? All right. With everybody in favor via voice vote, this meeting is now adjourned at 10:26 a.m.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.